stories that my Henry, that Ann mentioned earlier, is George was in the corral one day, and a steer charged him. He ran for the fence, and his belt came loose and his pants came down, and he tripped and fell. One of the cowboys shot the steer, and when George got up, he used one of his favorite sayings, which is, "By God, that was a close one." This is the pronunciation of it. That's the true. It means "by God." So that was one of his favorite sayings, and even when I was growing up, I heard that different family members would say that from time to time. George was also a businessman. He started the steampunk, had the cattle and everybody come here. He quickly learned that he could make more money selling his cattle, the beef from his cattle, than selling the cattle. So he opened the first butcher shop in Tucson. He and John opened the first butcher shop. They also had a slaughterhouse, and they also opened in 1903, they opened Tucson Ice and Storage. When I was growing up, we had this ice pick. I have a tip on it for safety. But I always thought this was an ice pick from his ice house. But as I learned, it's not. On the ice pick, there's something interesting about this item. The ice pick is from Arizona Fuel and Supply, and I'm in the process of doing research to actually find out who owned this. On two sides it says Arizona Fuel and Supply. On the other side it says Ice and Coal. And on the third side it said phone number 34. Oh. So, the first, and I'm going to check my notes to make sure I get this right. The first commercial telephone was installed in Tucson in 1881. It was to the Tucson or Arizona or Tucson Daily Star editorial, and also to Western Union. It was a party line. When I was 1 year old, we moved to Broadway and Swan, and we had a party line. My twin sister that couldn't make it today worked for the phone company for 35 years. And when she first started working at the phone company in the 70s, they still had party lines. Now we have cell phones and we don't need party lines. Besides being a cattleman and a businessman, George, sorry, back up. Picture of the steampunk branch in the branding time. I found interesting, and these are sort of hard to see. There are people, this looks like a group of cowboys, maybe at roundup time, branding time. But the people on the fence, this man has a bow tie. And they may be looking at, branding. They may have had a rodeo and breaking horses. Okay. Now, besides being the cattleman and the businessman, George was also a politician. In 1891 and 1899, George served in the legislature. The Arizona legislature territory drew up laws between 1864 and 1912 when Arizona became a state. George was a member of the Constitutional Convention. October 9th through October 10th in 1910, they drew up the Constitution for Arizona, which became a state, like I said, in 1912. In this picture on the bottom, there are names listed with numbers of all the delegates. Up here in the top, right in the middle, is George Pusch, number 12. And then on all the pictures are numbers, and George Pusch is right here at the bottom. Now, there are women in this picture in the top, and in this one too, but there were no women delegates at the convention. I'm going to go from George now to talk about his children. He had 9 children. Seven of them survived. The first 2 children were twins. They were born in 1882, and one lived 18 days, the other one lived 19 days. They were named Jenny and Tilly. If you go out to the Evergreen Cemetery, that's what is on their grave. What I found interesting recently, looking at Oliver's family tree, he has Jenny and Matilda. So I think Tilly is a nickname for Matilda. This picture is a picture of 6 of the 7 children. And as you can see, I overlaid, I'm not sure who 2 of these people are. I think that may be Henry's wife, Anne, but I'm not sure. So this is Fred, this is Henrietta, my grandmother, Mabel, which we called Aunt Mabel. Henrietta was known as Etta. And Frank, and I don't know if that's his wife or girlfriend, is one of Gertrude's sons. This is Wilhelmina, Aunt Mimi. If I slip and say Aunt Mimi instead of Wilhelmina, that's what I'm used to calling her. And this is probably one of my favorite aunts. That's Gertrude. That was their oldest daughter. We called her Aunt Tootsie. And I'm not sure who the children, this may be Robert, Mimi's grandson. I think it's too young to be her son. And this is George Sr., or George Jr., I'm sorry, the oldest son, and his wife, Robert, and then Aunt Mimi's, Wilhelmina's husband, Gus. The first aunt I'm going to talk about is Aunt Tootsie, Gertrude. And she was one of the first students at the University of Arizona. I also have a note. I did research years ago when Aunt Mabel passed away. She was the last of this generation, and it spurred something in me. At that time, she passed away in 85. Short time after that, I started doing research. When we were living in California at the time, when we'd come here, I'd go to the Historical Society and do research. And I made notes, and then I made photo albums for each of us 3 girls, for Janet, Nancy, and I, on family history. When Oro Valley bought this ranch, it spurred my interest again, and I started doing more research. In one of my notes, Aunt Tootsie was noted that she was the editor of the Review. I don't know if that was a paper at the U of A. I have to do more research. She married Henry Ziff, and they had 3 children. Aunt Tootsie loved coming to the ranch. She would go hiking And one of the stories, again, that I've heard from Henry, is she would go across the street, and to what you said about owning the land across the street. She'd go hiking, and one time when she went hiking up there, she found some Apaches camping. She just sat down and started talking to them, and she liked to go hiking, and she also, I found interesting, worked. Henry, her husband, was a commissioner of the state parks. He was into politics, and he was also postmaster for 4.5 years. Postmaster term was 4 years, but he probably took over for someone and then served another 4-year term. During that term, Gertrude worked as an assistant. There is a copy in the Historical Society documents of her signing the oath for an assistant, to be an assistant at the post office. So, and I found references, several of the family members, the women working. So we have a long history of working women in the family. In this picture, and this is also over in one of the other rooms, Gertrude is right here in the picture. This is George Sr., Matilda, and George Jr. I'm not sure of the other person. This is my grandmother, and Matilda again. There's a woman next to her. When she arrived in Tucson, after she arrived, her good friend Sophie came, and Sophie eventually married John Zellweger. And I have several pictures with her. And this tall gentleman right here in the dark shirt is my grandfather, Hugh Ballinger. The last story I want to share with you about Aunt Tootsie, Gertrude. She was famous for riding a black stallion. And people often thought that's how she was going to die, because he was pretty frisky, as stallions tend to be. And this is Gertrude right here in the front, the the rider in the back, or the first horse right there. But Gertrude lived to be 91 years old. And she passed away sitting at her dining room table. She just slumped down and passed away. Oops. Okay. George Jr. managed a ranch called the Canada del Oro Ranch. Now, this whole ranch was called the Canada del Oro, but right to the south of the steam pump ranch, right where Home Depot is now, Denmark, was called the Canada del Oro Ranch. That's the ranch that we grew up knowing. That's the ranch that we came to. By the time I was here, the steam pump ranch had been sold to the Proctors. This is the sign as you went in right off of Oracle Road. At the time, Oracle Road was just a little 2-lane road. And the 4-H member was the foreman, Frank's son. This is looking east toward Oracle Road. You're standing in the driveway. All of these pictures are the same, looking out toward Pusch Ridge. And again, the four sisters, Henrietta, my grandmother, Maybelle, Gertrude, and Wilhelmina. When we were little, we'd come out to the ranch during the year, but the best for me The best time was Christmas time. We had a huge family tradition. Christmas Eve, everyone would come over to the Armstrong, which is my maiden name, Armstrong House. We'd have a big pot of tamales for family and friends, and I keep up that tradition today. Jim and I have been married 40 years, and we have had tamales every Christmas Eve that we've been married. We would then open presents Christmas morning, come out to the ranch Christmas Day, and it was wonderful. I mean, we as kids, we played, ran, we rode horses, and in this picture, the ranch house sits right here behind this big tree. On this side on the north side of the house, there was a white propane tank. And when we couldn't ride horses, we rode that propane tank. We'd run, take a running start, and we'd jump on the propane tank like it was a bareback horse. I talked to recently my cousin in California, Walter III, and the first thing we talked about were those Christmas parties and how we used to all gather and run around and ride horses. So it's all a very favorite memory for all of us. Pancho, or Frank was in charge of all the cattle. And in this picture, this is before I was around, so it was prior to 1949. Now you all know how old I am. This was Frank's house, and this was the hay barn. One of the things we did when we weren't riding the propane tank was we'd go over here and play in the hay barn, and jump on the bales, climb up as high as we could, and jump down. In this picture, Walter Sr., Mabel, Fred, and Jim Hankins, who's and Mabel's husband, my grandmother, my older sister, my mother, and Roberta. To give you a perspective of where the ranch was, this is a then and now picture. The four aunts are standing, the house is back here, looking out at Pusch Ridge. This picture I took just a few weeks ago. I'm standing in the doorway of the Bed Mart. When you leave here today, going down Oracle Road, the very first stoplight you come to goes into Home Depot, Bed Mart. So I'm standing in the doorway of Bed Mart. This is the stoplight coming in. Right here is a sign for Big O Tires. If you look at the skyline, it's exactly the same.
Barbara, if you slide the two bottom legs out more.
It's a ticket from
Wow. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm now going to get into a little bit of my family. In the chart we're right down here, Henrietta and Hugh Ballinger. Hugh Ballinger, my grandmother also attended the University of Arizona, and she was in sorority. The Hugh Ballinger, when he passed away, he'd been in Tucson for 40 years. I don't have a date of their marriage. That's something I need to do some research on. But Hugh Ballinger was a World War II vet. He also had Ballinger Fuel and Supply. So the fuel kind of runs in the family. He started that in 1920 when he came back from the World War I. Did I say World War II? Yeah. I did. World War I. In 1920. He also, 5 years prior to his death, he worked for the Internal Revenue Service. Hugh and Henrietta had one daughter, Louise, my mother. In this picture, this picture is in the display case right here, but this just shows you what I found interesting in going through these pictures is the dress when they were out on the ranch. Hats, the men were in suits and bow ties a lot of the time. This first rider is my grandfather. He's got that, it must have been taken the same day that other picture was, where the group were standing together, he was on the rear end. He's got either that or he liked to wear his dark shirt and hat, just because that's the same dark shirt it looks like as in the picture. My mother, Louise, my favorite story was the story that she told when she was born in 1913. At that time, there were still Apaches coming to the ranch. She told us a story when she would be out here at the ranch and the Apaches would come to trade to get flour and sugar. She would hide behind my grandmother's skirt. And I always think of her about in this picture hiding behind my grandmother's skirt. Up until I started doing the posters for this presentation, this picture was my favorite of my mother. I have one of her sitting in this. This was taken after or before, but I have one of her sitting in the studio where the picture was taken with her big white bow on. But now, this picture is my favorite. One of her sitting in the basket out at the ranch. So, the baskets were used probably by George Pusch and the family, but I didn't know they held children. the precursor to a playpen, a basket. There were three of us, three children, my mother, and this is my mother with Janet, and my father with Janet when she was a little baby. I don't know. This is Nancy, and that is myself, and my older sister. Janet was about 5 when we were born. These, we had a neighbor that had a company making these dresses. They were called squaw dresses. And my mother frequently wore them. I found another picture. She's in a white one with all red rickrack. But that's another one of my favorite pictures. I'm this little one right here. The Canada del Oro Ranch, when we would come out to it, we moved to Broadway and Swan when I was one, as I said before. When we moved there, my grandmother was very worried because it was so far out of town. And today it's Midtown. When we would come to the ranch, we'd ride out River Road. River Road was a dirt road. Well, no, it wasn't dirt road. It was paved. But there was nothing. It was just this wonderful country lane. I still like coming out that way because I just feel that country road and the joy of coming out to the ranch every time I'm on River Road. My grandmother, for 4 years, was the superintendent of the Arizona Children's Home. I don't know, but I guess maybe this was one of their publicity pictures. And I found another picture where she is, you know about this is rodeo month, the rodeo, the vigilantes, when they corral somebody on the freeway, and they usually do it on Wednesday, and they get room and board for the weekend and get to go to the rodeo. there's another picture I have of Henrietta accepting a check from the vigilantes for the Arizona Children's Home. Wilhelmina, right there, was a military wife. Her husband, Gus Kanabe, joined the military in 1909, and they got married in 1917. He was part of the Mexican border campaign. He served in World War I, and he also served in World War II. Between World War I and World War II, for a time, he managed the Knox Corbett Lumber Company. And in World War II, he ended his career as a colonel. When he enlisted, he was a private. He ended his career as a colonel, and he served in the Pacific as command quartermaster of the 5th Air Force. They lived at, if you think of the U of A Mall today, where the grassy area is on Campbell, right across the street from that is Hawthorne Street. Their house was 1947 Hawthorne Street. It's 5 houses in Campbell. And that's where she lived and cared for their son while he was off in the service. The next aunt that I'm going to talk about is Aunt Mabel, or Maybelle, she was named. She also attended the University of Arizona. I have an old picture of hers, which I didn't get printed, but it's of the University of Arizona, and the University of Arizona was Old Main. That's all that's in this picture. And then there's another picture of Old Main and them playing football in the front of it. And that's all that's in, there was nothing else around it at the time. Aunt Mabel married James Hankins. He was originally from Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and came to Arizona in 1912. He worked at the Maxwell car sales. In 1915, there's a newspaper article that he sold 4 cars in 4 days. And he then later went to own his own dealership, and the Hupmobile, H-U-P-P, but the car is H-U-P Mobile. I believe this is a picture of one of the Hupmobiles that he sold, and this is Aunt Mabel sitting in the passenger seat. I'm not sure who these 2 people are. I think probably Uncle Jim took this picture because he's not in it, and she's in the passenger seat. He then, they moved to, the Hupmobile was made between 1909 and 1940. I want to read it. When they got married, there's a newspaper article that states that James was, I have to read this because I didn't memorize it. James was an enterprising young businessman, and Mabel was one of the most well-known girls in the young social set, and she has endured herself to all that know her. Besides being very active in the social set in Tucson, they probably came out to, where to go? To the ranch. This is pictures I've gathered of them having picnics, maybe another one of the cars. And in this picture, well, in a lot of the men are in suit and ties, the women are in fancy dresses and long skirts. This one they seem a little more casual. There's a canteen here. And what I found interesting, there's a glass. And they had to take glass and their china and their dishes on picnics. They didn't have plasticware like we had now. They're sitting in this picture on, you see very well, but they're sitting on one of the Indian rugs. Now, the Granada red rug that we have up here and the one I have at my house all obviously haven't been used very much. This rug is another one that's been passed down in the family. This is one that, Jim, you want to hold this up? This is one that my twin Nancy had. And hold that in up. Yeah. And she used it. And it was used before she got it. So you can see the difference. And this one probably doesn't have as much wear as the one does in the picture. But they would take these out, and instead of a blanket, they'd sit on the rugs. Thank you. They moved back to Uniontown, and George became a well-known lumberman back there. Jim. Did you say George? Jim, sorry. Jim. Something I found when Aunt Mabel passed away, we received all of her papers and her newspaper clippings she kept, her photos. There were 2 letters in there, condolences to her when Uncle Jim died, and they were from the FBI, saying that Uncle Jim was a big supporter of law enforcement. They were a big supporter of him, and it keyed a memory for me when Uncle Jim and Aunt Mabel would come out here. He had a camera. And this is the early 50s, late 50s. The camera was about 4 inches long and about that wide. And to take the picture, he'd slide it like this. And he'd keep it in his shirt pocket. And I wonder if he ever got that camera from the FBI. Because we had brownie cameras that were quite large at the time. They would come out here every year for several months. They were probably one of the first snowbirds. They would come out here in February. Aunt Mabel's birthday was the 24th of November. My mother's birthday was the 18th of December. They would have, all the women would gather at our house and have a luncheon for all the aunts. And we were not allowed to come in the front door after school. We had to go around the back door. But if there was any leftover dessert, we could have it in the kitchen. Because the back door went right into the kitchen. They would stay from just before Thanksgiving when they got here through rodeo, through February. And then they'd go back. And they came on the train. The train station downtown, we would go. It was always a big deal for us to go down there and meet the train. And I can remember standing there in this big train running into Tucson, coming into Tucson. The next one of the children I'm going to talk about is Fred. Fred went to Tucson High. And he played football. The coach he had at Tucson High was Coach McHale. The same coach, the coach at the U of A, and that McHale Stadium is named after Pop McHale. He was also in World War I, And I have a newspaper clipping saying that he was one of the first young men to enlist in World War I. He did, when he got back, he did several things. He was a civil engineer. He was deputy sheriff of Pima County. He was a bailiff for the Superior Court. He was county assessor. He had a short marriage to Elsie. And he lived at 1600 East Spring Street. Spring Street is just a block north of Grant. The last son I'm going to talk about is Walter again. Walter was a U of A graduate. One part of my research is going to be to see if the others graduated, because I have records that they went to the U of A, but Walter is the only one that I have said that he graduated from the U of A. Walter managed the steam pump ranch until 1925. In 1925, he and his wife Catherine went to California, and his son, Walter III, still lives in California, as does his other granddaughter. Walter in California worked as the Petroleum Equipment Association executive and was very prominent in that business. A lot of the articles that my aunt had talk about him, and again, in his in the paperwork there are letters that he had gotten when the Catherine had when he passed away, about what great work he did. The last two stories that I want to share with you are stories that involve horses. And because February always to me is rodeo month, the children days still get 2 days off for rodeo, we always do. And when Nancy and I were in high school, we used our riding skills that we had gotten at the ranch, and we went riding at a stable out on south of 22nd Street on Harrison. There was a man named John there that had a stable, and he would drive his station wagon around town and pick up kids and take them all out there to ride horses on Saturday. We always went out in a group. We never rode out by ourselves. He didn't allow his horses to go out by themselves. One year he decided that we ought to all ride in the rodeo parade. Then there was a problem of how to get the horses down from 22nd and Harrison downtown. So Nancy and I and a few others drove horses from Harrison and 22nd Street down 22nd Street to the freeway to a set of corrals. There were traffic lights at that time. You know how today when there's a funeral, the police stop traffic at the traffic lights? One of us would go in the middle of the intersection, stop the traffic, all the horses would be driven through, and then we'd go on till the next night and do the same thing all over again.
How many horses?
I want to say maybe 20, maybe 15, 20. So, yeah, it was, and it's funny, I thought back of that again recently. I've always thought I would like to be on a roundup. I did. It wasn't cattle, but I herded horses. Nancy also during that the trip down 22nd Street, one of the other riders dropped something, and so Nancy got off with that rider and picked it up, and when she went to get back on her horse, the other rider took off. Well, Nancy's horse wanted to take off. So she's there trying to get on her horse, hanging on, but she eventually got on and caught up to all of us.
Wow.
The last poster I have to share with you, when we, just until recently, I thought this only was, back when Nancy and I were little, we were probably about 5 at this time, about 1954, I'm guessing the, a man would come around the neighborhood and with a pony and offer to take a picture for a fee. One of us would get to, or the rider got to wear a cowboy hat and he had a scarf for him. We had our picture taken individually, but when we got to take it together, Nancy was really upset that I got to be first. I had the scarf on. But, so we had our picture taken on this pony. In doing this research, I found this photo that the Historical Society has, and I sent it to Walter in California, Walter III. And I said, "Is this your father?" And he said, "No, I don't think so. I think it's my grandfather." If this is his grandfather, this was probably taken about maybe 1901. And so I don't know if maybe the man that brought the pony to us was a relative. The ponies look similar, but they're not. If you look at, I mean, it's time-wise, you can always tell from the picture, but this pony has a spot here. The pony we were on has a spot on his nose. This pony doesn't. The white sock on the left forehoof is not on this pony. But don't know if they were, maybe the business went that long.
Were those the Castros that brought the...
I don't know. Is that a...
You know Judge Castro,
Yes.
who was... They used to have Shetland ponies off of River Road there at Dodge.
Okay.
Right across now where the Jewish Community Center. Across the street was Castro's Ranch. And they had Shetland ponies that we used to have come to our birthday parties and stuff. Yeah.
Maybe, probably.
Yeah,
Someone connected.
He served as, I don't know, Department of Interior Secretary or something in Nixon or somebody.
Wow.
Yeah.
For a man leaving Germany at age 18, coming to a country he didn't know, I believe George Pusch made a significant impact. Not only in Tucson, in Oro Valley, certainly, in Arizona. And I think he made and left a wonderful family legacy, despite wearing a pair of red top helmets.
After this, so we can't keep her for long, but if anybody has any questions for Barbara, what time is it? 1:35. 1:35. You've got like...
I've got time.
Okay, you've got time.
I have a baptism to go to. 3 o'clock.
It's too bad your sister wasn't here, because she would have had other opinions.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yes. See, I would have never said that. Yes. Yes.
My great-grandfather was William Henry Sutherland. I don't know if that name.
Oh, you're kidding.
I didn't know if that name ever popped up in some of the goings-on, because their ranches were on the other side.
Sutherland.
I don't know.
Can I get your contact information?
Yes.
Wow.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Pancho, who you said was like the foreman?
Yes.
Do you know until how long he lived? Because somebody told me that when they were young, they moved into this area, he used to let them in to go walking up in the desert and go scouting around when they were little kids. And I was trying to verify, his story and how long. Do you have any idea how long he lived?
I don't. And I'm trying to remember when that ranch, George passed away in 57, and I think shortly after that, Roberta left, she didn't sell because they managed the ranch. She went to California. So I don't know how, in that picture, he was significantly younger than my uncle. So I would say at least past 50, 57 maybe, I don't know.
Okay. Is Henry Z-I-P-F? Okay. And there was a Henry Jr.?
Yes.
And did they live?
Gertrude had 3 sons. Walter was a half brother. Henry is still alive and lives down in Tubac.
And
He used to live out in Tucson Country Club?
Yes.
Okay.
And he will be here on April 13th.
They were friends of my parents.
Yeah, so he'll be a guest speaker at April 13th, along with Barbara returning, and her sister hopefully.
Yes.
For a colleague of mine for the Historical Society Board went over in the wash on the other side of the berm, and we saw quite a bit of stuff back there. I wonder if you could or have any recollections of how far into the wash the ranching activities went from this site.
When we would ride past the wash, and because I remember going down and up, we would also ride the other side of Oro Road. And in fact, the Canada del Oro Ranch, just the other side of the edge in, if I can find the poster, were the branding corrals. The corrals for Roundup.
Where were they located again?
Let me show you.
If I can answer that just a little bit, though, I did notice in the picture where they're sitting on the blanket, where she talked about them sitting on the rug, the same fences is out there.
Okay.
Okay. This is Oracle Road, and this is Oracle Road. You can see it's just a 2-lane road. There's the middle divider line. This is standing looking east. Right here are the branding corrals.
Oh, yeah.
But when we rode west, we rode the other side of the river.
But right on the other side of where the berm is now, was there a ranch, any buildings or corrals?
No, there was nothing. There was the ranch house, the Canada del Oro Ranch House, and we could see this, and we always, they would always, that's a steampunk, your great-grandfather owned that.
Was there a slaughterhouse on this property?
No, the slaughterhouse that George Pusch did was 3 miles south of Tucson, and they had a windmill and a 45-foot well at the slaughterhouse.
I hear you pronouncing it La Canada
La Canada
del Oro. And I'm just wondering if that is the appropriate local pronunciation or if it's really Canada.
Canada. Yes.
Well, I know the street signs don't have a little
No,
tilde.
it shouldn't have any. It shouldn't have any. It's Canada. You're right. You're absolutely right. I don't pronounce it right, and I know that when I was practicing. Yeah, that's I should have had you hold up a sign that said
But you don't say La Canada.
No. Yes.
I have no idea about timelines, but Hacienda del Sol was a girls' school. When would that have been? Did anybody go there in the family, or I just was curious?
No.
Is that
Not that I know
It must
of.
have been around the same time.
I don't.
Time frames. Well, do you know?
I think it was 20s.
It was 20. Yeah. Okay. So it would have been more
Later.
with the property.
Later.
Yeah, but the youngest, Walter was born in 1898, and he was the youngest. So.
Was there ever school in there?
Well, no, my sister. Further down, where Cattleman State Park is,
Yes.
there's a little building. Was that school?
You know what? If I can tell you, the book Barbara Marriott that's going to come and speak, her books does talk about that school, and that it was a boarding school for boys.
Okay, that's the one she's talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
Not the one that's all the way up in Catalina, but in Catalina State Park area, which would have been near the southern one.
Rural Market.
Right. Yeah. So, sorry.
Did you have another question? No, that was it. Oh, okay. Any other questions?
So interesting. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank